respected HR consultant with a PhD in organisational psychology, experience in talent acquisition, the assessments of job applicants, employees, author of A Better Choice, the Manager's Guide to Skills First Hiring. Hello and welcome to the Practical Leadership Podcast. I am your host, Paul Morton, and we are talking about leadership, management, and the various lives that surround it. It's my joy, delight, and privilege to bring into my studio some of the smartest, wisest people I've been able to find for your delectation and enjoyment. And I hope that you do get a lot out of the conversations that we have here. When you realize that your management team has grown too fast, or you've inherited a new team, and the fastest, best lever you have for growth and improvement is attached firmly to those managers, get in touch. I help you run management, coaching, and training programs that'll make a big difference really quickly. You can find me at the Practical Leadership Academy website and on all the usual social channels. I'm delighted to have Mark Smith. Thank you for joining me.
Well, thanks for having me, Paul. I've been looking forward to recording this podcast with you and having this conversation.
Dr. Smith, well, I've got this problem with my elbow. Right? Do people ever come up to you? I don't know if you advertise yourself as Dr. Smith or anything like that. But
I rarely advertise that way, but it's funny. I was recently in this is weird. I was in a ballet with my daughter, and everybody had a bio, and in my bio, it listed me as Dr. Smith, ... And I had a number of people after me just assumed that I was a physician. Oh, you're a physician. Let me tell you about this. And I'm like, who told you I was a physician?
Is there a doctor on board the flight? Only if you want me to reorganize your strategic imperatives towards a new format of acquiring talent.
Exactly.
No, he can't breathe. Yeah, that's somebody else. I love it. I love it. How did you then decide that you had to make a better choice? And what led you to putting pen to paper or typewriter to the machine and go for skills first hiring? Now, I've been hiring people for years. It's a challenge. It's fun. It's the superpower a good leader brings.
Yeah. So I've been in this field now for 20 years or so. And really my focus has been my whole career hiring and how to hire better. And when I'm having various conversations with people and they find out, I'm an organizational psychologist and I work with companies doing hiring, inevitably the conversation will go this way. Oh, how should we hire people? And I'll say something like, well, you should evaluate the job, determine what the key skills, abilities, motivations, personality traits are, and then evaluate the candidates fairly on those things and hire the best person. And universally, everybody will agree. They'll just sort of nod in agreement to the extent where they'll imply something like, well, everybody knows that. Why'd you just waste 30 seconds of my life saying something that everybody agrees with? But there's a next step to this. And the next step is, and education is often a poor measure of these things. And counting years of experience is also often a poor measure of these things. Now, there are going to be some exceptions, like with education. If you're hiring a very technical person, you need to hire based on education. But largely, I'm recommending, okay, we ignore those things and we assess the person directly. Because when companies are hiring, well, I need somebody with a bachelor's degree. What do you actually need? And is there a particular major that you're looking for? And then once you start having those conversations, then you're going to get some disagreement. And so again, I'm recommending for most jobs, again, not technical jobs, but for most jobs, not using education as a screener. And sometimes experience is very important, but to say, oh, you need 10 years for this job, and therefore, if this person has 7 years of experience, he or she is not qualified. I'm gonna push back on that.
It's funny the number of people you still see. You get this intersection of experience and education, right? Now, I think in the UK, at least, thankfully, I have 2 small kids, so I've got this ahead of me. Thankfully, we're seeing a bit more on the apprenticeship route available for younger people, or at least degree apprenticeships as well, so you can go off and earn money and get your thing at the same time. But you're asking somebody Okay, so we did a bachelor's or a master's or whatever it is we need in this. When did you get that? 10, 20, 30 years ago. Right, what do you remember about it? The name of the educating thing? Oh, right. Okay, so why am I asking you about it?
Right.
You know those 10 years of 20 years of 30 years of experience you've got? Yeah. How many of them were just repeating the same damn day again and again? So you don't have 10 years of experience. You've got 10 years of living the same year of experience. So that's not 10, that's one. In fact, that's -1 because you're going backwards. You haven't. So what did you do different then? I tried to hire people exactly as you said. And my thing is, rather than say, here's the job spec, because you go into any company and they've got job descriptions coming out of the nostril. And it's the
Right.
same thing. And it's been copied and pasted. And it's the same criteria, the same, we're a happy person, lovely, open company where we respect everybody. And this is the copy paste nonsense. And they're asking for a 3-legged giraffe or a 5-legged sheep or a unicorn with whatever. And in reality, there's only 3 or 4 jobs to be done by that person. And I say, get those clear in a bit of paper, work out how you're going to measure them, and exactly as you said, hire the right person for the job.
Right.
But how do you measure them? What are the gaps? This is, I think, where your clever bit comes in. It's the skills first piece. So talk us through that. Talk us through a couple of examples. How this works.
Yeah. So I think exactly as you said. Okay, analyze the job, analyze the organization. So we identify the skills, the abilities, the specific pieces of knowledge, the other sort of personality traits and stuff that you need. And you can't have too many of those things. It's how many do we actually need? And then we assess those. And when I started, computer-based assessments of candidates, that was, yeah, it was available 20 years ago, but we were still sort of figuring out how to do it. And so most assessments were still paper-based. And then a lot of companies switched to computer-based assessments, but I think necessarily had to be unproctored computer assessments. And that made a lot of companies queasy. Okay, how do I know that this person isn't cheating? How do I know that, his wife isn't actually taking this test for him? How do I know these things? And these are good questions. And what I've found in some research I did is the vast majority of people don't seem to cheat those things, but some do. And so 5% or so would not just subtly cheat, but like absolutely, completely, blatantly unethical to the point that if laws were involved, it would clearly be illegal. Okay, but now technology has moved beyond there, and so now we're actually getting to the point of assessments that have either a live proctor involved or an AI proctor. And so we're much better at computer assessments. And those computer assessments can be assessments of skills, assessments of ability. And to some extent, we're talking about knowledge assessments, but a lot of times the knowledge is going to be tapped during an interview component. But we've got those things. So which would be the hard skills again? Skills, knowledge, abilities. But what about these other pieces, the personality stuff, the soft stuff? Because as I'm sure you found, and a lot of folks listening here, a lot of times when you're making a hire, and particularly if you've made a bad hire, it's probably not because this person wasn't smart enough. And it's probably not because this person didn't have the right knowledge. Some of the times that occurs, but that's the exception, not the rule. The rule is the bad hire typically occurs because it's a bad personality fit. They don't fit the organization. They don't interact well with other people. And so the real question and the real trick is how to evaluate those things in the hiring process. And to the extent, can we use computer assessments? Do we have to use interviews or other things? And so we need to go about making sure we assess those things and not just say that we're assessing those, nominally assessing those, but assess those in a careful way, assess those in a way that we know is valid. And so there are a lot of assessments out there. There aren't a lot of good, validated assessments.
Yeah. I mean, there's I think the famous one ever is Myers-Briggs, right? And apparently Myers and Briggs invented the Myers-Briggs over a weekend. And the question from some psychologists is, that's nice. What did they do after Saturday lunchtime? So yeah, there's that distinct lacking in validity for quite a lot of these personality type things. When you get into role-based assessments and the technical stuff, I think, like you say, you pick up a knowledge thing fairly quickly, as in this person is really superficial. So you said X, how would you do X? Thank you for play.
Right.
But then you get into, as you say, it's the personality piece. Now, I spent a lot of my time hiring sales people, sales leaders. It's one thing about salespeople is they talk really well. They sell themselves really, really well. And getting beyond that, getting into the person, can be quite hard. So especially when you're hiring managers, managerial talent, I think it's particularly challenging. If you were in this position and you're advising somebody, what would you say is a 5-step, 3-step magical guideline? What's the things to go for here?
Yeah. So as I said, carefully identify the job, identify some assessments, and making sure that they're valid. And again, there are a lot of assessments out there. Most of them aren't valid. So making sure that they're valid, and validity means evidence that it's job related. And so it's not, you're talking to the salesperson from the assessment company and they tell you it's valid. That's not validity. Validity is a process, and there are a couple of different ways to do it. But making sure that the assessment is valid, and these days those things are like at the top of the funnel, because it's much more easy to use computer assessments now than it used to be. You can run more people through your computer assessments. Okay, they pass it. Now you've got your top 10 people or top 5 people. And then those are the ones that should be interviewed. And when we're interviewing, in the same way where we're talking about assessments, when we're interviewing, you got to make sure that the interview is valid. And the most important piece there is that it's a structured interview process where you're asking the same questions to the different people, and you're evaluating their answers, their responses, in a consistent way. So often companies, they'll use interviews. Of course, everybody uses interviews. Why wouldn't you use an interview? But you're just talking to somebody, and then afterwards, it's, well, did you like him or not? And there will be,
at least they're honest. At least they're honest.
Right.
Didn't like him.
Right, exactly. But what you have is a different interview for each individual candidates. And so there's no fair way to compare. And so if you don't have the reliability of the interview between people, there's no way that interview process has any validity. It will actually predict who is the best person. And so you just need a plan going in. Okay, I'm going to ask these questions, and we're going to evaluate the responses in this way. So for this question, a good response looks like this. A bad response looks like that. And you put together like a scoring protocol. You have a rubric for each question or set of questions, and then you use that. And that can get you down. Often it can get you down, from 5 or 8 people to 2 people, and you go, okay, now I like these candidates, both of these candidates, but I can only hire one of them. And then you go, okay, how do I make that final choice? How do I make that final selection in the process?
Before we get there, I think just going into this slightly ahead of the final piece is, I think, like anything, it's a problem you're trying to solve, and you don't solve problems by making them more complex. You solve them by making them simpler. And if you look at a typical interview process where, let's say you're trying to hire for 20 odd people in a team, you're trying to build a team, you're hiring 10, 20 odd people, you're going to interview 100 people for this, from different stages, from telephone interviews to face-to-face or to video, and eventually into a case study, and then eventually you get a final interview, right, which we'll talk about in a sec, because I know you have some special answers here. What you've got are 5, 6, 7 different people interning, asking random ass questions of all these different people, essentially inserting, creating chaos. I don't mean chaos as in like, oh, it's a big mess. I mean genuine butterfly wing chaos theory.
Right.
So you're adding fractal-like complexity into a process that is already trying to discern between human nature, which in itself is intensely biased from the subjective point of view, but also monstrously complex. And applying that to an organization and a role and. So I think the very least you can do is exactly as you said, is just make a list of
Right.
questions, and a list of answers. This is the question we're asking consistently. Here are the answers. This is what a good answer is. This is what a bad answer is. Where in the scale did it fall? Just simplify the heck out of it. And that way, you're not only getting a fairer representation, you're also removing some of the biases, the subjectivity biases that people will have intrinsically, and getting down to the right two people. So when I take those two people and put them in front of you and say, okay, hey boss, these are the people I think we should hire. And Mark turns around and says, okay, next. But that's the bit that becomes interesting. So Mark, what happens next at that point where we've eventually got the two in the job?
Right. Right. And every hiring process is going to be different. And there are going to be some where you interview 10 people and there's just one. There's one that stands out and that person is clear. And at that point I say, okay, you've done the first couple of steps. You've used computer assessments and there are some other recruiters talking to them and they did great in the interview. Hire. Don't dither, don't do anything, make the offer at that point. But a lot of times it's not as clear as, oh, I found my person. It's, oh, I got two people that I like equally, or there are three people. I don't have any idea how to tell these three people apart. And if that's the case, and you can legitimately only hire one of them, okay, what else do we do? And a lot of times organizations, they will add another interviewer to the mix. And even if they use structured interviews before, that other interviewer, maybe it's the boss's boss, they're not going to follow the list of questions. They're going to ask whatever they think, and then they'll give a confident answer. Oh, hire Sue, and largely won't be based on anything, because the general recommendation that I'd heard for years is, okay, at that point, go with your gut. Go use your gut feeling. Who do you feel most comfortable with? And maybe there's some point there. If there are some people that you're not comfortable with, they probably shouldn't be in your final group. So what I'm recommending and what I recommend and what I work with companies on is these final few people going through a role play assessment using assessors, expert assessors. And in the role play assessment, okay, here's a fake company, here's a scenario. You're going to meet with this person, and that person is me or one of the other expert assessors. And there'll be something weird about this scenario, but there's no tricks involved. It's just, how are you going to respond to kind of a realistic work situation? And it's going to be an intentionally provocative, realistic work situation. But what I've found is you get to the reality of how somebody will actually interact in a work situation pretty quick. And so, if you gave somebody a personality assessment and it's like, I like to work with other people, and it's a scale of 1 to 5, and they go 5, okay. And then the next question is, I often show up late to work, and they go 1. Well, okay.
Yeah.
There's potentially there's a nugget of validity in there, but the majority of people are going to fake, especially if they're salespeople. As salespeople, are going to fake everything. But once you start interacting with them in this kind of realistic role play exercise, the facade starts to fall. And then in all of our role play assessment, there's always, you give them a little bit of material to prepare, and then there's something that's going to change in the middle of the assessment. And so they'll, like, if they need to, plan on, okay, this is the person I'm going to present, and they sort of may sort of be ready to be a fake person. But then once I add a new piece of information, now they can't rely on their plans anymore. And at that point, either the faking completely goes away, or they're such a good faker that maybe they're just going to fake their way through the job, and it might actually be okay, especially in the situation of salespeople, because salespeople, to some extent, they're bluffing for their real job, at least part of the time as well.
So you introduced this element of pattern disruption.
Yeah.
to almost break out of the plan and then let people reveal themselves, reveal the true nature of their inner self
Right.
in a context related to the job, related to the industry. That then you take back to the organization and say, A, not B.
Well, yeah, I mean, we'll have a short report on each person, but a lot of times it will show that, yeah, you know what, this person, it seems to be, better on these key competencies than this person. And yeah, I think the twist is, yes, to get at the reality of the person, but for so many jobs these days, and it feels like more than it used to be, so many jobs these days, adaptability, flexibility are real key components of the jobs. These are competencies that you need. Okay,
Resilience. Yeah.
yeah. So I can measure that. And again, I'm not measuring it by asking a question. How adaptable are you?
Very adaptable, Mark.
Oh, yes, I'm very adaptable. No. It show me, but it's
Yeah.
even more than show me. It's you don't even know that I'm asking you to show me that.
Yeah.
But I'm asking you to do things, and then I'm twisting it, and I'm asking you to respond. And so naturally, I can evaluate your adaptability there. There are some people you introduce new information, and you just get this blank look, like they don't understand that a new piece of information is being introduced here. When we're not going to subtly introduce that. We're going to introduce that because and let's go to salespeople. A lot of times, what's going to differentiate a good salesperson from a poor one, everybody can respond if the client says, "Hey, I have a great opportunity for you. Let's talk about it." Everybody can respond then. Not everybody even understands a lot of times when sales opportunities come up and the client, offhandedly says, "Hey, we've got this new project in a different city and this is the situation," and they never say the key word that would, raise the antenna for the salesperson, but it's an opportunity, and the good salespeople will understand that, and they'll go, "Oh, that's a great opportunity for us," even though they didn't introduce it as such. And the other one who's really good at taking orders, but may not really be adaptive, may not really be flexible, may not even recognize that that's a real sales opportunity.
If they don't use the words, I have money, would you like some? That's a I
Right.
feel like I like the idea of the sort of the pattern disruption there. We used to do a case study for sales folk who would give them a real case, where they had to sum up. It was like a final presentation. And then we would bring in somebody. We'd bring in somebody. So you're going to meet CEO, you're going to meet VP, whatever. And this is the plan. So go in, prepare for that. They come in prepared for that. There are three people here. Oh,
Right.
and you've got to see, do they actually ask, who the hell are you and why are you here? What's important to you? It turns out that I'm actually the chair of the board, or I'm just a secretary, or whatever it is the role was. It's always interesting to see what happens, what's the dynamic, and like you said, you disrupt that
Yeah.
expectation, and you just see how they deal with it. Oh,
Yeah, and again, different people respond in very different ways. They may not respond to the personality inventory in a very different way. The assessment results will look the same for the computer, but the reality is, people are different, and we need to be able to find these things.
that's an interesting thing. When you start, then, so let's say somebody's listening, they say, okay, I'm going to do this. I love this idea, right? What are the biggest challenges your hiring managers are going to face when they start going down the skills first? How do
Well, I think it's breaking the old mindset, especially here in the U.S. So many jobs have naturally, maybe not naturally, have traditionally had an education component to them, and sales. So many sales jobs say bachelor's degree, and then if they have a master's degree, even better, and then um, and then I say, okay, let's not do that anymore. And they say, well, Mark, this is a remote job. I list it on Indeed, and the first day I have 250 people applying for it. They all have some sort of sales background. How do I get from
yeah.
250 in a day, which is a number I can't deal with, to a number at least I can have somebody actually read their background? and choose. How do I go from here to here? Because I can't deal with the big number. And that's really when we need to have some initial assessments that that we can use for everybody that are going to be valid. And we'll do the job of winnowing down from a big number to a reasonable number in the same way that education used to.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I do think that is a thing. You're using these crutches just to filter people out.
Right.
You see folk putting up, some receptionist's job in the Midwest or something. Yeah, 1,100 applicants for it. Whoa. And this is just a small mom and pop company, maybe 150 folk. They don't have the capacity. I mean, and I preach this. I preach and say, look, if you put a job out there and you get lots of applicants, you're beholden to these applicants at least to tell them thank you, but no thank you.
Right.
Not this, we'll only get back to you if. That's just horrible. It's horrible for the applicant. It's horrible for your reputation. But how am I supposed to deal with 1,100 people? What am I supposed to do with that? You triage them out and you say, gotta have a bachelor's. Gotta have 27 years of Pitman shorthand typing for the pool or whatever it was. So you're using the technology now maybe to start triaging that down. You get to a point where you're making more sense of the individual.
Yeah. So let's use that technology. And again, it wasn't that long ago that wasn't possible. But you didn't necessarily need it because I had a job opening.
1,100 applicants.
Yeah, because if you had a job opening 20 years ago, 20 years ago I was in grad school and I was working with Monster.com. And so, Monster. So let's go back 25 years. Okay. Then you probably contacted the local paper.
Yeah.
And you had your little small, tight, sort of 1-inch box. You crammed in some words that you had a job opening and
cleaning lady wanted.
Exactly.
Oh yes.
Exactly.
Old school.
And I think we are about the same age. Remember that. And when I talk to my kids about that, they couldn't even fathom that that's how you had to reach out to people. And you hoped that they saw this thing in this obscure part of the newspaper. And they even go, newspaper? What the heck is a newspaper? I see it on the movies, but I don't even. I was talking to my daughter the other day and I said, have you ever read a newspaper? And she said, no, but we would put it on the floor when I painted at times. And you go, okay, yeah, that seems about right. I've
actually gone out and bought a newspaper specifically to mop stuff up because it's terrible. So,
growing up, that was my first job. I was 13 years old and I was in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and I was a paper boy for the Kalamazoo Gazette, and it was a great job for a 13-year-old.
Early start, massive cycle.
That's right.
All right, we're going to get one message now as we wrap up. One message out to the world. I was going to give you 10,000 billboards and the biggest marker pen you've seen. What would that message be you'll share with the world?
Yeah, and I think where we're at now is knowledge, skills, learning are important and probably more important than they've ever been. But colleges and universities aren't the only place to get that. And if you're hiring, you shouldn't really care where the knowledge, where the skills came from, but you need to know that your people have it. So colleges and universities aren't the only place to get knowledge and skills these days. We're in the information age. Lots of people can learn lots of things from YouTube.
Is there somewhere that people can find you when they need help with their hiring process, their skills first hiring?
Yeah, absolutely. So, again, the book, A Better Choice, The Manager's Guide to Skills First Hiring, and you can find that on Amazon or Barnes and Noble or other places where you buy books. And then my website.
We'll put a link to the description.
Yeah. Okay, great. And my website is abetterchoicehire.com. And there has a bit more about me and the organization and what we do. And there's a good sort of contact form in there. You can always reach out to me through LinkedIn as well. And I'm sure you'll have my LinkedIn information in the show notes.
Indeed. Skills First Hiring all the way. Mark Smith, Ph.D. Thank you very much indeed for joining me.
All right, great. Thanks, Paul.
And that's a wrap. I hope you enjoyed the show. Thank you for joining me. If there's ever anything I can do to help you on your journey, then do please reach out. You can find me on LinkedIn and all the usual sources. Do please subscribe, leave me your 5-star review, and most importantly, get in touch with your comments and feedback. It's really how I grow, and that's what I'm doing this for. Thanks again.